drawing relatively simple architecture is a great way of developing our drawing skills of architecture in particular, but generally of our drawing skills, because we're not distracted by a lot of complexity of form or a lot of complexity of detail added onto those forms. So it lets us focus on fewer elements, but therefore to focus more intensely, more easily. And it also lets us judge how successful we've been at the end of the drawing, because often an overloading of detail or complexity of form can make it harder to assess, have we got the fundamentals correct? When our architecture is mostly fundamentals, when it's mostly height and width and various elements of a simple form attached to each other, that lets us see more easily how they are, how we've drawn them, how they appear in our drawing. Have we captured the proportions? Have we captured the feel of the building? Is it recognizable? Is it more than recognizable? You know, our critiquing, our self-assessment of how we've gone so we can have a focus for our next drawing is easier to do. And that makes it a tremendously useful learning experience. But hopefully we actually find it easier to get on top of these fundamentals when that's all we're having to think about. When the forms are simpler, it also lets us work out, when we draw freehand with ink, just how to progress our drawing more easily. What lines to put first on the paper so that we can put them as accurately as we can, or how to put them on the paper so we get a sense of what we're creating, but perhaps we don't commit a final mark effect in places we're not quite sure yet exactly what we're drawing there. So this is, I think, a very good exercise for that. And if you'd like to have a go practicing your fundamental architecture skills, proportion and so forth, then you'll find this photo on my channel community page and you can have a go drawing this courthouse, which is what it is, an old colonial era courthouse from a small Australian town just on the other side of Sydney called Hartley. It's in an historic town and there are still a number of the original buildings, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably seen and maybe even drawn some of them. But this courthouse is the largest, grandest, most public building, no longer used as a courthouse. So you can see me as I move out from the columned portico. I'm aligning the new parts of my drawing with what I've already drawn, firstly in the reference and then on my drawing. And I'm looking at the gaps between the windows. Now, it might have been more accurate to have gone out and tried to get a sense of the whole wall and then put the window in that. But generally I find, particularly in a smaller window, a smaller wall, and a simpler form with just one window flanking the portico on each side, it's a bit more accurate to look at the gaps between the elements and to go out with them. And then paying attention to the architecture. It's a bit deceptive with that pilaster on the corner, because the, if you like, capital in inverted commas there, which is really more a decorative part stuck on to the top of the pilaster, lines up with the pilaster on the portico, but there's nothing above it on the corners. So again, it's the sort of detail it's handy to pay attention to. And if you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button for me and help me out as well. That would be much appreciated. So now I'm extending these sections. And when I look at this now, I can see much more clearly what I couldn't see as obviously at the time until I'd done more of the drawing. And you're watching this at 1.5 times the actual drawing speed. So if you want to see it a bit slower, you can use the cog icon to slow the video down and see it closer or at drawing speed. But it wasn't so obvious, the issue, and you can see me aligning the chimneys with what's underneath, and need to pay attention to the fact that the right-hand chimney is a different size, I believe, to the left-hand one. But what I didn't realise at this point is that while I think the overall size matches the reference, and I was trying to draw this same size, the problem is the porch area is wider than it should be. I don't think it's particularly higher, but it's wider than it should be, which means that in effect the wings on each side look smaller in relation to the porch area than they do in the reference. So this is the sort of thing that when we finish our drawing, whatever we've done, simple or complex, we need to assess. We need to look at it and think, well, did it work? The method, the thinking, the strategy of my drawing, did it pay dividends? Am I happy with how it's looking? Or is there an issue? Now, it may not be an issue that makes the building look unreal, as in non-realistic, for someone who's not seeing the reference. But we want to develop our drawing skills and our drawing observation so that we can capture the feel of the reference, and that usually includes the proportions of whatever we're looking at. Now, you'll notice that the ground slopes down on each side. This courthouse is on a slight rise. And ground level, we should never assume is going to fit in with the perspective angles of our drawing. So if we look at the top of the courthouse, the roofline top slopes slightly down from left to right. And if we look at the top of that foundational platform that's of a darker stone at the base, it slopes slightly upwards from left to right. But then that darker stone below that then fills the gap between the horizontal line of the base of the actual walls and the ground level. As I said, that slopes down on each side of the central area. And so now we have a little more detail on the left-hand side as well. I almost forgot to put the sills under the windows on. That would have been a shame since there was so little detail to put there anyway. I'm using a 0.2 millimeter pen, a Copic multiliner, if you're interested. And now there's a gate. Not a gate, it's a fence with, I presume, some wire which just isn't showing up at this distance. And now we have the quite severely foreshortened wall down the side, and get this roof section on. And now we're able to consider what we're doing. I'm not sure why this has suddenly slowed down so much. I clearly messed something up in my timing of the video. Now, this is a way of checking if our proportions are accurate. See what I'm doing? I'm comparing so that's pretty spot on. And when I look at the width, I can see that, let's have a look how it goes. Yes, gosh, that's embarrassingly spot on. But what I can see now quite clearly is that while I had the height and the width pretty accurate, I didn't get the proportions of the components within those, if you like, outer boundaries as accurate as I would have liked. And because, as I mentioned before, my porch is a bit wide, that has the effect of making the two wings feel a bit narrow. So the building overall looks a little bit sort of squashed in from each side. And these are the incredibly helpful things we can discover when we take time to, if you like, mark our work at the end. And if I'm a self-taught artist, if I'm on my own learning journey, then I need to be my teacher as well as the student. So here's some very quick, some very gestural marks to represent the trees that are behind. And for very, very little effort, they make such a wonderful impact visually on our scene overall. It really creates a scene instead of a building with just a few minutes work. So now I'm doing the hatching to get a bit of darker value in the porch area. I didn't do it perhaps as dark as I could have. And just a little bit of work to give an indication of the stones. And if we do this, we should try and make sure that we get the size of our stones, as indicated by the divisions between them that we draw, as proportionately correct for the overall size of the building as we can. We don't want them much larger or much smaller than they appear, because that can mess with our perception of the building at times. And now I just want to make sure that I put a little bit of hatching along this foundation platform that the building sits on, because it does help restore just a little bit a stronger sense of the proportions of the building. It does make it feel a bit narrower. As I said, the problem isn't the height or the width. The problem is that the porch area is just a bit too wide. It probably should be one of the pilasters taken away, maybe the right-hand pilaster taken away, and then put on the other side, so to speak. But except for that, we're pretty much done. What do you think? It's a lovely, simple, colonial era Georgian sandstone building. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Well, why not have a go? I probably could have done this a bit better. Often we don't see things that aren't quite working until a bit later in our drawing. When we have more to compare, it becomes generally easier to become more accurate as the drawing goes on. But sometimes there are issues from the start that we can't do anything about, except put them in our drawing, strategizing, experience memory, and remember them for next time. But whatever you're doing, however you do it, make sure you have fun. Bye.